think we are now live with Dr. Brad Goodman in Birmingham. Good morning, Brad. How you doing, friend?
Hey, Bernard. Good to talk to you.
You too, and I appreciate you taking a few minutes to chat with us this morning. I'm trying to still get us set up here for our weekly NOMBERG Law Live that we've been doing for a few years on Tuesdays, and we try to bring you interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And Dr. Goodman certainly fits that bill. I've known Brad for more than 20 years. Our paths almost crossed at Vanderbilt. We were a few years apart, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. But the reason why I invited Brad to come on today, he is an interventional physical medicine doctor. And for those people who don't know what that is, that's why we're here today. And we're going to talk a little bit about what Brad does. And we're also going to feature a little bit about how his type of practice works, given we're in the middle of the pandemic and how he's dealing with his patients. So Brad, I want to welcome you to the show. I want to thank you for having some time this morning. And if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit more about your practice.
Ooh, okay. So, like you said, I am a physical medicine and rehabilitation specialist. Within physical medicine and rehabilitation, which is a very broad field, my particular area of interest would be interventional physiatry. And the simplest way I could put it is I am a non-surgical orthopedist. I take care of patients with musculoskeletal problems. So think of back pain, knee pain, shoulder pain, hip pain, any musculoskeletal issue I try to deal with in a non-surgical fashion. With that said, there is lots of good surgery for knee pain and hip pain and shoulder problems, like getting your knee replaced or a meniscus repaired. But in the spine, really the interventions are the last thing you want to do. They're a last resort. There's not a lot of really great interventions. So I look for minimally invasive ways of tackling problems that typically would need surgery, like a large ruptured disc or other compressive pathology in the back, such as spinal stenosis, where the nerves are being compressed through arthritis. I gravitate toward these minimally invasive technologies to try to accomplish what the surgeon is trying to accomplish with a more aggressive or a larger scale operation. So kind of like the interventional cardiologist who would open up a blood vessel in the heart versus the heart surgeon who would replace the vessels and do what's called a CABG.
And Brad, within your practice, are your patients mainly middle-aged, older, or is it the whole gamut of society, mainly of the people who you mainly treat?
So it's really the whole gamut of society, anywhere from 12 to 100. A lot of time with the 12-year-old, I will be dealing with concussions and the residual headaches associated with that. And with the 90-year-old, I'll be dealing with a fracture in the spine because the bones have gotten so soft, and I will be putting cement in the back called kyphoplasty or vertebroplasty to try to alleviate the discomfort with a broken spine. So it really is the gamut, but in all those ages, we're looking for minimally invasive interventions, either an injection or some technology to treat the problem. In our age group, we're dealing more with ruptured discs and degenerative discs. And and chronic back pain in that regard. And we look toward just plain old epidural blocks. Sometimes we do research studies with various companies around the country, injecting stem cells to try to regenerate the disc. So it's a very interesting area right now.
Particularly if you're treating ages, as young teens all the way into people who are in their 90s, it must be a challenge for you at different times, depending on, because no two cases are going to be the same. No two people are the same. I'm sure that brings a lot of interest, a lot of challenge to your practice at times.
Well, that's what kind of makes it fun too, is to incorporate these new technologies and have such a broad focus. It never gets dull, and that's why I always encourage young people to pursue careers in medicine, because there is so much diversity in medicine. I mean, really, if you want to be a lawyer, you could be a doctor and a lawyer. So I encourage people always to pursue a path in medicine, because I think there is something for everybody in medicine. But it's a lot harder if you're a lawyer to then become a doctor. You follow me, Bernard?
Mm-hmm. I am.
I feel like I could go to law school right now
Mm-hmm.
and change careers and start practicing law if I were to go to law school. But I think it'd be a lot harder for you as a lawyer to now go to medical school and change careers.
Well, certainly the schooling, the amount of schooling is a lot less for lawyers than it would be for your profession. That's for absolutely sure. Brad, let me ask you, both you and I are middle-aged former college athletes, and we have so many friends and colleagues who've been our same route, who now are not nearly as active in their profession as they were when they were younger and athletic. And even for those who just played sports all through their life, but they're getting older. You see this big desk behind me. I sit behind this desk all the time. Now, what you don't see is I have a treadmill that's next to me. A lot of times I'll just stand at my desk and walk on my or at my computer stand and walk on my treadmill to get in my steps when I can't go hiking or go outside. So here's my question for you, and it's an open-ended question: is what general advice do you have for people who are in, I would call, white collar jobs, whose schedules don't really permit, but now they're starting to feel what 90% of us feel? My back hurts, my knee hurts, my neck is starting to be stiff. How can people in general deal with these issues?
Great question. And there's so many different ways of tackling this question. Naturally, I have friends who I played with in college, sports with, tennis specifically. Football's a lot harder sport for you to translate to. But to begin with, for people that are currently active, my advice to them is don't stop. Stay active. Because once you stop, it's harder to restart. So we'll get to the folks that have stopped and want to restart, but just to begin with, it's important just to keep going. I, for instance, I'm not one who can do what I call the rabbit sports, the treadmill, the swimming in the pool, the bicycle. Those are very, very challenging to me. And what I do is I just have continued to play sports, and I have never stopped. So I play 4 sports: tennis, squash, hockey, and ultimate frisbee. And I really don't play frisbee that much anymore.
Did I hear you correctly? Are you still playing hockey?
Well, I was up until COVID. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And it's interesting that you stopped on hockey, but hockey of all the sports is the easiest on my body to play.
Wow.
You think it's the hardest because you associate it with hard hitting and checking, which there is some of that, but I'm in a non-check league. it's a non-contact league, but we do have hitting and checking, unfortunately. But you're gliding on the ice. Mm-hmm. So the trauma to the body compared to the other three sports is really minimal. So hockey by far is the easiest sport I play. Wow. But because of COVID, I've basically used my time to play tennis, which allows me to be athletic and socially distant at the same time. So the first thing is never stop. The next thing is if you have stopped and you want to restart. We put a lot of barriers into restarting activity. You know, one barrier is that you need to see your doctor before you resume activity. And the reason for that is mostly to make sure there's not an underlying medical condition, let's say in your heart, where you could drop dead from a heart attack. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, it's hard for me to think of reasons medically why you would need to necessarily not be active. So the other issue that comes up with resuming activity is I'm going to hurt myself. Mm-hmm. And that's true. We see a lot of people that do the CrossFit and do other activities that they otherwise would not have hurt themselves had they not done that activity. What we fail to recognize is that by not being active, we're also hurting ourselves. We are aging ourselves. We are causing our physical conditions or our health age to be diminished by that. And so I like to sort of think about activity as not enough activity, the perfect amount of activity, and overactivity. Mm-hmm. And anything over the perfect amount of activity is too much activity. And anything under the perfect amount of activity is too little activity, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is we're never going to have perfect. Mm-hmm. We're never going to have perfect. We're either always going to be underdoing it or overdoing it. And I think the risks of underdoing activity outweigh the risks of overdoing activity. So my one thing is I want to encourage people to start, and the sooner you start, the better. And so the other thing I like to say is bad activity is better than no activity. You follow me, Bernard?
I do.
I'd rather
give us an example of that.
Bad exercise than no exercise. Mm-hmm. You follow me?
I do. Just move your body.
So what exercise should people do? Mm-hmm. Whatever they enjoy. Mm-hmm. That's the first rule. Whatever's going to keep them doing it. There's apps on your phone called the 7-minute workout. Mm-hmm. I've tried it. I can't do it. But it's 7 minutes. That's all it is. That's how hard it is to get people to be active. But really all it takes is 7 minutes twice a day.
I don't think that a lot of people, if you haven't built it into your lifestyle, if it's not on your calendar, like a reoccurring appointment or a reoccurring thing that you do daily or a few days a week or whatever it is, people have the mindset, well, it's just not, I can't handle that. That's just one more thing I have to do. But one of the things that my brother and I, David, who's my law partner, and I have done is, Brad, I put on my calendar every week to the next week when I'm going to be working out, so that I put my work schedule around those workout times. And that just kind of flipped the switch many years ago for us. It reprioritizes what we need to be doing when we need to be doing it. The work is always going to be here. I know what I need to get done in a given day, but I want to fit in that 30 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on what I'm doing, into my daily routine. And that's so hard for many people to kind of put that mindset, because it's not part of their lifestyle. And I don't know how. I'm certainly not a trainer. I'm not have degrees or have the experience. I just have a lifetime of moving my body and exercising. And so that's my question to you is if a patient comes to you and they're a pretty sedentary person and they don't have an active lifestyle, part of what you've already told us is awesome advice, but how do you flip that switch in your mind? I need to start moving my body. Does it take a medical scare, a health scare, a lot of times for people to do that?
That's the $1 million question. And frankly, as a physician, we can emphasize to the patient how important it is to their health to be active, but actually affecting that change is different for everybody. There's probably a few commonalities, but some ways that may work, like you said, is scheduling it into the day. For me, that's not going to work because if I don't enjoy it, Bernard, I'm going to skip it. Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't work for me. Sometimes what works for me would be hiring a coach. And if I'm paying somebody to do it with me, I'm more likely to do it because I now have a financial investment in it. Finding somebody who, like you, who likes to work out and you like to be with that person, perhaps can be a motivating tool. But the big message is you've got to stay active. We don't end up in wheelchairs. We end up putting ourselves in wheelchairs. And we could actually get out of wheelchairs through exercise. There's lots of studies that show that we get debilitated through our lifestyle habits. But how to get people to change their lifestyle? I think programs like this and my program, Doc Talk Live, things like that, perhaps address that a lot better than the doctor in the office, because I'm focused, when I see you, Bernard, I'm focused on your, let's say, your knee injury that's potentially keeping you from walking on your treadmill. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, if you had a knee injury, you may do better by walking backwards on your treadmill rather than forwards on your treadmill.
Well, guys, for those of you just joining us or maybe catching us on a replay, I'm talking with Dr. Brad Goodman, an interventional physical medicine doctor. He's with Alabama Orthopedic and Spine. And Brad is talking about lifestyle choices and what we need to be thinking and moving our bodies. But I want to go back to one of the things, Brad, that you said at the beginning about people who either are needing to start or already, there's two different categories of this. And I want to talk about those people who are already starting, and they may have a good idea about what type of exercise they like to do and when they can do it and those things. But a lot of misconceptions that I've seen that exercise alone will help you to be as healthy as you can be. And from what I've learned, that's not the entire part of the balance here. You've got to have a good eating habits and sleeping habits and those kind of things. And here's where I'm coming to you. As part of your interventional medicine practice, a lot of people who, if they're given a choice between having a surgery to fix a back issue or a knee issue versus a non-surgical choice, I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that most of your patients want to go the non-surgical route because for whatever reasons they may have reservations about surgery. So backing up to what I said a minute ago, those lifestyle choices, eating and sleeping and all of those things, how are those factors for you for a given patient when making a recommendation, non-surgical versus surgical, on a given injury that they may have?
So I tend to separate that a little bit, Bernard. Mm-hmm. In other words, for instance, let's take the back, okay? Back pain is the second most common reason to go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
The most common reason is a head cold. So if you have a back injury, you have to stay active in spite of your back injury. Now, it might slow you down and you might not be able to be as active, but you have to continue to stay active regardless of the back problem. In fact, bed rest has been shown not only to be ineffective for back pain, okay, but worse for you. So there is no indication to prescribe at this point bed rest for an acute back injury. Mm-hmm. Now, how you choose to treat the pain, whether through just focused exercise like with a physical therapist, or taking medications to quell the symptoms, or getting an injection in the spine to alleviate the pain, or surgery to perhaps cut out the problem. Regardless of the treatment, you have to find ways of being active, period. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
The other thing that I would say is when you look at the things that in our age group, we are most likely to die either from a heart attack, cancer, or some sort of traumatic event like a horrible car crash. But of those three, a heart attack is the biggest risk to our life, okay? And when we look at the risk factors for heart disease, some of them you're well aware of: high blood pressure, smoking, obesity, diabetes, right? Mm-hmm. Well, just as important as those risk factors, physical activity is also something that is important to prevent heart disease. So not being active is as bad for you as smoking a pack a day.
Mm-hmm. Well, it certainly makes sense, and hopefully it wakes up people, but oftentimes people just ignore it, and they just have resigned that this is their fate in life, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do because I want to enjoy what I do. And it's hard to break habits.
It's very, very hard, and you have to be motivated. Mm-hmm. And things that are motivating could be you feel bad, could be you have a friend that's motivating, it could be you find an app on your iPhone like I mentioned, the 7-minute workout, things that can get you going. But if I could say one thing, if you're inactive, the best place to start is just go for walks. Walking can be a great exercise.
We're certainly seeing many, many more people out on the streets given our current status in the state during the pandemic. And I'm glad to see that. As you may or may not know, Brad, I love to hike. I get out there a few days a week behind the JCC and just get lost in the woods. And I love seeing that there are more and more people out there, but it's a little unsettling because I always take it, well, these are my woods. Why are you here and you're in my space? But I love the fact that I'm seeing so many more people out there. But I want to ask you, Brad, I want to kind of switch gears for just a minute or two, and I appreciate your time, and we're getting closer toward the end of our discussion. Are you doing telemedicine or telehealth, or are you still seeing patients in person? How is that working for your patients, current patients, or maybe patients who want to come to see you?
So number one, my practice has been cut way down. So patients just are quarantining, they're sheltering in place. Mm-hmm. They are not coming in that much unless they're just really in severe pain and naturally want to avoid the hospitals and the emergency rooms, places that clearly are more covered up with the risk of COVID. So I am still seeing patients. As such, we have implemented a lot of various policies in the office setting in terms of the care partners are asked to wait in the car. Mm-hmm. Patients are being called in from their car. They're not congregating in the waiting room. So we now have masks. Masks initially were not readily available. So we are sort of affecting accommodations to see patients. We are also capable of doing telemedicine, but I haven't done much of it. I've done some, but I am excited about the possibility of telemedicine. I love the concept of telemedicine. For instance, if you could somehow upload your MRI of your back or your x-rays that you've had done onto some sort of platform, and I could review that and see you, I think we could accomplish 90% plus of what we could accomplish in the office. And so I predict that because of this, the technology toward telemedicine is going to accelerate at a greater pace than it would have if not for this. So prior to this, there was a lot of roadblocks, if you will. One being insurance. Insurance doesn't necessarily cover telemedicine like it would a regular office visit. But I think having telemedicine in the future is ultimately going to be a lot more convenient.
I saw a headline earlier this week that Medicare is now getting into discussing approving telemedicine or telehealth. So that may be a real game changer right there. I talked with a doctor friend of mine out of Ocala earlier this week, Dr. Jonathan Walker, and he's been doing telemedicine for a couple of years now, and he expresses a very similar approach and optimism about how it's going to be expanding more and more, making medicine much more available to people who are shut in their house or for whatever reason can't physically make it to your clinic or to your practice. Brad, how can people go ahead?
I see patients all over Alabama and the Southeast, and having somebody drive to see me, if we could accomplish so much more, but being compensated for seeing them via telemedicine is going to be important.
Absolutely. How can folks get in touch with you if they feel like they need your services or your clinic? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, our phone number that I memorize is 205-838-3900. That's our old number, but it should send you to our new number, which I don't know off the top of my head. You mentioned our practice name, Alabama Orthopedic and Spine. We really go by Ortho Alabama now. But I think another great way of finding me is just to Google me, Brad Goodman, MD, Birmingham, Alabama. I think all of those will get you somewhere to find me.
And I've put a link to your webpage, your bio webpage, on the show notes here. But before we get out of here, I want you to tell us about Doc Talk Live, your show that you've had. I want to hear more about this and how people can benefit from watching.
So Doc Talk Live. So years ago, Bernard, I used to do a radio show on WAPI every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. called Doc Talk. And people would call in, and I would have a guest on, and we would talk about either heart disease or diabetes or whatever, and people would call in with questions. And so for years and years and years, I've been trying to figure out a way of bringing Doc Talk back. And then I guess kind of like the way you found Facebook Live and social media and NOMBERG Live, I felt like Doc Talk Live was a way of I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yeah, I
I've
can.
lost you.
I'm just sharing the web page
Oh,
to
okay.
you, and it's a great picture of you smiling at Doc Talk Live website.
Oh, I appreciate it. So anyway, I felt like that would be a great way of bringing the radio show back, where people could participate with the guests. They could type in questions. I've always wanted them to be able to call in questions and things like that. And then post show, a lot of people are able to write in questions and comments. And so just like you, I bring on various guests and I interview them and we talk about various things. Today, I'm doing palliative care with Rodney Tucker. On Friday, I'm doing allergies with Dr. Clara Chung. So I like to talk about all aspects of medicine, and I want it to be educational and informative, where people that are interested in various subjects can call in and or type in or at a later time. And I asked them to also suggest topics for other shows or other guests. I've had people say, hey, would you get so and so on Doc Talk Live? And I'm like, absolutely. I do my best to try to share with everybody what people might be interested in.
Well, I think it's a fantastic service. It's just making you more readily available to the public and for people to get their answers, because that's what if they're home, they're just looking for answers and they're looking to lower their stress by finding such answers.
Yeah.
And Brad,
Doc Talk Live is not about Brad Goodman at all. It's about health, and it's about medical topics that hopefully will address concerns that just, people that are into health can find.
It's very much like the concept of this show. It's not about me or our firm. It's about bringing on individuals who have expertise. I really appreciate that. Now, before I let you get out of here, we got to talk Vandy Sports for just a minute. I know you're proud of the Vanderbilt tennis programs. They've had great success, the men and the women. If they ever get back to playing again, are you in touch with the program? Do you ever get to see them play either live or on television? What's your involvement with them these days?
So my involvement with Vandy tennis sort of waxes and wanes.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of depends on who's playing for them, and whether or not I have a personal relationship with the players that are currently there. Naturally, I keep up with the old players that I played with. I tend to get more into the tennis programs locally in Birmingham because I sometimes get the opportunity to hit with the women's team at UAB. The Samford men's coach is a good friend of mine. The UAB men's coach, I actually take tennis lessons from. So I tend to gravitate more to the local tennis programs and support the Birmingham area more than Vandy at times.
Very good. For those of you who don't know, Brad was team captain back in his day at Vanderbilt, and the program is very successful. And we have tons of great programs, not just on the high school, but also the college level in the Birmingham metro area. But Brad, I want to thank you again for your time and your expertise and sharing with us today. All just solid, excellent information.
Bernard, thanks for letting me on NOMBERG Live. We need to find a topic for you to come on Doc Talk Live and discuss something with regard to healthcare and the law that folks need to know about. Anything that comes up off the top of your head, Bernard?
I'll be thinking about it. I appreciate the invitation, and I'll definitely follow up with you in the next couple of days. Definitely.
That would be awesome, Bernard. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Guys, this is another great episode of NOMBERG Law Live. Dr. Brad Goodman here in Birmingham area, sharing some solid information for everybody. I want to thank him again. I want to thank you guys for stopping by. We had so many folks come by here this afternoon or this morning, as we do every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Pacific, NOMBERG Law Live, interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. You guys stay safe. The pandemic is not going to be indefinite. We're going to eventually come out of this, but be patient, be safe, and do the right thing. Y'all have a great rest of your day.